Welcome to the Reciprocity with AG podcast, hosted by Andrew Gadomski. Here, we explore ideas and experiences that transform lives with elegance and integrity. Andrew spent over 15 years as a workforce analyst for Fortune 500 companies in finance, healthcare, and supply chain sectors. In 2022, he took on the coveted role of Senior Operations Research Analyst at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, committed to enhancing cybersecurity and AI skills for the American people, its residents, and tribal nations. Andrew founded Aspen Analytics, a firm that leads in compliance and ethical challenges in our AI-driven era. Their Canopy platform turns risk into action, offering real-time policy solutions across wage and human capital disclosures, algorithmic and AI decisions, and cyber risk to HR departments.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Reciprocity with AG podcast. We're now on part 2 of this episode. Let's get going.
Which class, primary, secondary, professional, personal, doesn't matter, made you raise your hand and participate?
I am probably the biggest hand raiser you will ever meet. It is without boundary or situation. In fact, it's become the running joke. We have this morning meeting called Start Sterling that we do every morning at work. And someone different leads it every time and will pose a question at the end about the principle we're discussing. And if it's quiet too long, I become so physically uncomfortable that I cannot stay quiet. This used to happen a lot in school where it's junior high and the teacher poses a question and zero participation. We're all eighth graders. We're too cool to talk. Part of it is that I'm a bit empathic in that I can really feel other people's emotion and anxiety. And I'll feel the distress of the person presenting that they're not getting participation, to the point where I will be the only one participating and I'm over participating, but I can't stop myself because I have to fill the void. Yeah, I mean, from pretty much from birth on, I've been a good little participator, but it's because I feel this anxiety for the person presenting that nobody is engaging with their topic.
Yeah, I struggle with that too. When I'm receiving instruction, I'm constantly trying to understand, okay, how do I apply this to what I'm doing now or what I intend to do? Or I'll ask a standard question like, okay, we didn't talk about what learning this provided, or we didn't talk about a mistake, and what can I do to offer that insight? But I usually wait. If no one's participating, then I'll go ahead and do that. But I have really considered, as I do more webinar and a webinar-like series, and there's 10, 20, 100 people on a session, I've really considered using the Socratic method
Mm-hmm.
and saying, okay, be ready. And I'm going to call on you. And either people are going to have questions or I'm going to make questions happen. And then you're going to share an experience or why this is or is not relevant to you. And I don't think that's necessarily the void. I think some of that is the anxiety of the void that you're talking about. But I also don't want to dismiss the fact that there are other experts and experiences in the room.
And to that end, when I'm presenting, often I'll reach out to a few people in advance, typically introverts who need more time to process, who might have good things to add, but they need to feel it and think it through and get comfortable with it. And I'll tell them, I'm going to call on you, but I'm giving you 3 days to think about what you want to respond with. And then so you're more comfortable when you're sharing. And that's a method I've used to draw out some of the people who have great ideas, but maybe they're not as comfortable on the fly. Oh, yeah.
For TA week, for years, I would lean on other speakers or people who I've had relationships and say, hey, I might need your help in getting the dialogue going. So here are 2 or 3 questions. And I would make sure that there's about 10 that I would have and say, okay, look, if you're not hearing anything or if you don't hear that question, I need you to stand up and pop it out there because I may not have put it in the presentation on purpose because I'm hoping somebody will share the experience. And it's usually almost a lead in where it says, hey, I'm having this problem. They've given some time to think about it. And then I might address it, but then I'll say, who else has that problem? And so now you get the hand raises. And then it's, how is your problem related to that? I didn't come up with that idea. I saw that on the web somewhere, but I think that it is tough to get that participation. How do you create community amongst a team? Or you don't get to do the thing where it's, I do both. Or you can talk about how you diffuse conflict in that team to increase connectedness.
So I'll talk about diffusing conflict because I think this is an area a lot of us struggle with. And I know within the teams I've led, I think sometimes some members are more comfortable taking a stand and setting boundaries with their own opinions and how they feel. And I think it's really important to help those people feel heard and validated, but then also to create safe spaces where the people who are less comfortable speaking up also get to assert their opinion. I'll give an example. I had a team at AVEX, and Sam Gagliardi, if you're listening to this, you'll appreciate this, but Sam was not shy about sharing her opinions. In fact, I love Sam so much. She has told me as her boss to take a hike so many times in different contexts. And she was nearly always right, but she was comfortable being more vocal. On the other hand, I had another member of the team who might disagree, but was never going to offer that opinion and would have allowed bigger personalities to walk all over her if we didn't make time and space for her to also express herself. So if there was a conflict, I think the very first thing you have to do is just really hear and listen to someone. Really don't listen to respond, listen to hear. And I think really understanding where people are coming from will shed light on a lot of things to help you find common ground. After everyone feels heard and they've expressed themselves and they feel validated, I think at that point, it's incumbent upon you as a leader to take a firm stance on whatever the outcome is going to be, and then support that rationale with examples of why you chose that. Because while it's up to the leader to ultimately be responsible for the decision making, and not everyone is going to be happy all the time, I think if you provide reasons for why you're doing what you're doing, people can at least understand, maybe I'm not happy with this outcome, but at least I understand where you're coming from. I feel like you heard me, you heard my input, and maybe next time I'll be the one who gets their way. And I found really just getting people on their own and helping them to vent to you rather than vent to the other person if there's person-to-person conflict.
One of the things that I've done over the last 15, 20 years is I've done a lot more advising related to data analytics is the difference between a dialogue and a briefing. And sometimes people believe that they're walking into a dialogue when they're really walking into a briefing where their participation isn't required. Their listening is required. And if there is something that they need to ask, you're going to prompt for the ask. If people want to understand the difference, this is a hard line difference. If you want to see the difference between a briefing and a meeting, I'm a big fan. I just saw it again. It's one of these movies I watch over and over again. Speaking of literary references, and no surprise, it's Moneyball.
I love that movie.
There's a briefing that Brad Pitt does, and it is not a dialogue. It is not a discussion. And he walks into his scouting and player development team and says, this is who we're bringing on. One of the people in the room says, what are we discussing here? He goes, this isn't a discussion.
I know that scene. I love that scene.
It's
and
like,
sometimes
okay.
you have to do that.
And sometimes that's actually the benefit of the engagement. And you're diffusing the conflict because you said there's no opportunity for you to conflict with what I'm about to say. You
Sure.
will have your ability to offer disapproval, but sometimes it is the brief out. And it is, this is what's happening. This is what you need to know. And I'm curious to see more leaders talk about the types of dialogues rather than the type of I'm having a meeting. Let's move on. So, what technology do you think is going to completely go away, completely retire? But it's really around how we interact is between humans, right?
So it's interesting that you talk about reciprocity and how we go back and forth, because I believe the smartphone is probably the biggest barrier we have to communication today. To that end, when my husband and I first started dating, it was like 11 years ago, if I had my phone out, he would very gently take it from my hand, place it face down, and go, "I'm here with you. You need to pay attention to me." And it was a boundary he had. And it's one that has been instilled in me now. And I find it very disturbing. I'll be out to dinner with him. We'll be engaging with each other, and we'll see couples that are just both on their phones and they're not paying any attention to each other unless they take a moment to take a picture of their food, and then they're back on their phone posting about it. And I think this is a huge impediment to our ability to function as humans, engage socially. I'm not saying the cell phone, the smartphone will go away entirely, but I see it being replaced, or at least seriously minimized, by wearables, ambient computing, AR glasses, smart earbuds, AI-powered assistants. I see it being more inobtrusive. I see some of the other technologies that sort of are coming from this need to disconnect from screens, because we're on screens all day. The average child now is on an iPad like some 12 hours a day because they're using them for school and then they're using them after school. I see some of that going away. Maybe not entirely, but I think the smartphone as we know it, I think its days are numbered because of the level of addictions that people are just gluing into.
I have a story associated with the smartphone. And it was at the HRO Today conference. God, this must have been a decade ago. And it was held in Philadelphia. It tends to be done right there near Rittenhouse Square. So for those of you who were familiar with Philadelphia, it's center city. It's away from the historic district, which is by the river. But just think about if you were to look at the skyline of the city and you were to see the tall buildings, it's in that area. And the name of the restaurant, I think, has changed over a little bit. It was a steakhouse at the time called Blade. And sitting there with a bunch of heads of staffing and talent acquisition leaders. And I can't remember who said it, but someone said, everybody take your phone out and put it on the table. And there's 25 people at this long table. It says the first person to pick up their phone picks up the entire tab.
Ooh, that's good.
And it was like, people were like, no, there's no one about, right? There's no one here who can't step away an hour. And in the event that your phone rings like 3 or 4 times, let's just assume, like within a 2 or 3 minute period, let's just assume that's an emergency from your family. But otherwise, it's off. And that created this dialogue that I think this is many years ago, where we're talking, some people probably had, it might be so long ago, like people had Blackberries. But it was, I hope that the smartphone retires in some format, but I certainly think that the idea of being able to use it in any context, in any time, I really hope that stops.
I'm 100% with you.
Like this podcast and its transparency? Then you will love Aspen Analytics. Their audit documentation enable employers to share with investors, analysts, and regulators how their chosen HR practices using AI, wage equity, and analysis reduces significant business risks. Remove these risks before they become real problems. Find out more at www.aspenanalytics.io.
When talk about when you've helped another colleague who's been struggling with work-life balance,
I have someone who's doing this right now. You know who you are. She is supposed to be an HR generalist, but we are onboarding a new recruiter and she's been helping out with some of the staffing. She knows how to recruit. She does it well. She is of the mindset that if she just works hard enough, eventually everything will be filled. And I've told her and I've tried to explain to her there is no work hard enough. There will always be openings. There will always be turnover. Your workload will never go away, at least in a perfect scenario. Otherwise, we're all fired. And I've been trying to tell her to pace herself. And she's going to want to finish my to-do list. And I'm like, your to-do list, if you're a recruiter, your to-do list never goes away. And if it does, you're getting laid off. So like, we don't want that. And I've been trying to tell her, but she's been putting in insane days, 12-hour days, 14-hour days, just literally burning the candle at both ends. And I found the only way I can get her to dial it back is to just stop responding, because I'm an hour earlier than her. Stop responding at 5 p.m. her time. And if she submits an offer letter for approval, a requisition for approval, any of those things, I simply do not approve it. I do not address it. If she emails me, I don't respond, because that is literally the only way I have to enforce her work-life balance. Some people will not listen. The other recruiter I mentioned to you before, Sam Gagliardi, same thing. She would burn the candle at both ends. And I found just by restricting the time frames in which I was responsive and would be party to this overwork, and then also restricting workload, right? So I'm working to pull some stuff off of this person so she has less to worry about and distribute more of the work to other members of the team. And I can't always control the outcome and help someone have good work-life balance, because some people are just so incredibly driven. They don't know how to. I feel like it's incumbent upon me as a leader to limit the amount that they have to do so that they can find that rest and find that work-life balance.
Yeah. Because sometimes they can't find it themselves. They need those boundaries and those guardrails put in front of them so they know when to stop, when to focus.
Like this podcast and its transparency? Then you will love Aspen Analytics. Their audit documentation enable employers to share with investors, analysts, and regulators how their chosen HR practices using AI, wage equity, and analysis reduces significant business risks. Remove these risks before they become real problems. Find out more at www.aspenanalytics.io.
If you were to create a music group, what type of music would you play? Who would you want to listen to it? And give me a band name.
Okay, so I thought about this and I wanted to go classical music because I love like a good string quartet, but then I was listening to some of your podcasts and someone already did that one. So I'm going to go with my backup plan, which is my other favorite music genre. I would do a punk rock / rockabilly as kind of vibe. Something like a bit of a combination of if you took Black Flag or Fugazi or Sex Pistols and combined it with Mike Ness, Social Distortion, Tiger Army, something like that. And I would name it The Smell of Death and Coffee, because my father was terminally ill and I would go, it was a beautiful hospital, Palomar Hospital in Escondido, California. And I would walk in and I was always struck. It was this, they had a Starbucks on the bottom floor and it was this beautiful smell of coffee. And then this intense smell of like industrial strength cleaners. And I'll never forget that combination of smells. It just smelled like death and coffee. And we were joking about it one day. And my dad was like, that's your new band name, The Smell of Death and Coffee. And that stuck with me. But no, we would make punk rock, rockabilly, and I would want people 40 and above to listen to it, and then people like 12 and below to listen to it, because I think eventually your parents' music as a child becomes cool to you, and kids like exploring the throwbacks. What did you listen to in high school? That kind of a thing. And I don't have kids. I've seen a lot of my friends' kids. I was at the airport and saw a bunch of teenagers wearing Nirvana shirts. And I was like, okay, I get it. And so, yeah, I would want the kids and the over 40 crowd to listen to it.
Yeah, it's interesting how the what is old gets, I don't want to say necessarily new,
Just
but
wait.
reimagined. And there's a great, I listen to this song all the time, and it's a mashup with Post Malone and Fleetwood Mac called Hollywood Dreams.
Yeah.
And it's bizarre because it evokes these memories of me sitting in the corner of my brother's room with his high school buddies. He's 9 years older than me. And they would play like all the vinyl, and I have a lot of vinyl. Now it's like you listen to Post Malone and it's this weird connection over almost 40 years.
Sure.
So I think it's great. I really like the smell of death and coffee. It evokes a lot of all the senses. What was your first job, and what learning do you use today from it?
So, funny story. When I was a kid, I was homeschooled, and I am the oldest daughter of 6 children. And as such, I did a lot of parenting. I seemed very adult. I also achieved my full adult height by the time I was 11. Knowing these things, you'll understand how when I, for the sailing class at the city of Poway, we had a tiny little lake, and they bought a couple little mini sailboats, and they had a class through the community center that taught you how to sail. So I took my babysitting money and I signed up for the class. It was $68. It was all the money I had. And so I did this sailing class and I loved it so much. There was nothing better in the world than sailing. The class ends and the instructor, the old man, Bud Montfort, asks me, he goes, "Are you going to come back to the next class? You love this so much." And I said, "I'm sorry, I'm out of babysitting money. I really can't afford it." And he goes, "Listen to this." He goes, "You've gotten really good." He goes, "Come back, teach half of the class." He goes, "You can sail for free." He goes, "And I'll pay you." And I said, "Okay, no problem." Mind you, I am 11 turning 12 at this point.
Oh, wow.
And so I don't know how he did it. I don't even care to speculate, but I got paid $25 an hour from the city of Poway. Ended up with a
Wow.
W-2. Each class was 2 hours. I did 2 of them per week for about 6 to 8 weeks, I forget. And I was teaching people twice my age, and it was great. And it instilled a lot of confidence. And then I made crazy rollerblade money, as you can imagine. This is the very early 90s. And so the rollerblades were like $300 at the time. So
Yeah, you're rollerblading and you've got bubble tape in your pocket. Like,
yeah.
you got all the things.
So that
Wow.
taught me a
You must
couple
have
things.
been
It
jacked up,
taught
right?
me, yeah, it taught me, one, you can do anything if you just show up and apply yourself. And then 2, I had never heard of imposter syndrome, and I can't relate to it. I've always just been a doer, and you don't have to have some special skill set. You can just show up, act as if, and get it done. And I've been doing that ever since.
If you think about the environment you grew up in, there's usually someplace you lay your head. What pictures or posters or artwork or music was part of that? It could have been just in a home. It could have been at the school. But is there something that tops out that's visual? Like pictures of horses.
Obsessed with horses. I grew up very poor, but we lived across the street from some people who had horses. So I made a deal with them. I would play in the corrals, and in turn, I got to ride the horses. I was obsessed with horses, read horse books, horse pictures, every inch of my walls. And my poor sister, I shared with my younger sister, and she got no say in the matter. And it was just covered in horses. And I'll tell you, I smell horse manure now. If I go to a fair or rodeo or something, I'll smell horse manure, and it brings about just the very best memories. It's just the smell of home.
It's just the mucking of the stall. Right? And, that definitely is a unique set of smells, and I can imagine the memories that get associated with that. Tell me about your best supervisor or colleague and why. You don't need to execute. So that's not, we're not necessarily doing that, but you certainly can if you want.
No, my best leader is my current leader. And I've had some good leaders along the way, people who have fostered my growth. But I would say Tara is incredible in the sense that I have the freedom to get the things done that I need. She's a good listener. And here's something different. I think it's because all of my previous bosses for the last 10 years in recruitment have been men for the most part. And having a woman, she's the VP of HR, but she also did my job before. And having that unique lens, I've just never had a boss where they ask what's going on with this, and I tell them, and rather than get all irritated and think I'm making excuses, she's like, oh, totally. I get it. I have that same problem. And it's not that she's doing anything remarkably different or recreating the wheel or doing anything. It's the level of empathy and understanding and support that I'm just unaccustomed to. I've worked for a lot of VPs of HR. They're men, they're older, they're in their careers. They've had, a lot of experience doing HR things, but they can't relate to the talent acquisition piece. And just having someone, I've just never, probably not since AMN Healthcare, have I had a leader that actually did recruiting. It's remarkable.
Yeah, recruiting and human resources is very different in that, and I recognize that they tend to fall under the CHRO or head of human capital umbrella, but one primarily deals with people who are on payroll. And then the other primarily deals with people who will never, ever be on payroll. And my favorite thing to do is to get people together in a bunch of recruiters typically and said, how many hires did you do last year? And a bunch of numbers go out. I said, how many of those people report to you? And of course, none. And I'm like, okay, you did a lot of things, but you didn't do the hire. Someone else, you helped facilitate the hire. But the majority of your job is engaging with people who never worked there.
Sure.
And I think it's very different when you have someone who's never been in that role managing you, is they don't understand that your daily experience isn't necessarily executing personnel actions or how many learning modules that individuals go through. I think it's quite different. If you were not permitted to use your phone, so you said we're going to get rid of the phones, what would you substitute it with? If you had to put this down, I'm holding up phone, everybody. You had to put it down for a month. What are you going to substitute it with?
I would read a lot more. Just books, novels. I have 2 shelves full of books, some of which I haven't read, some of which I've read multiple times. Anything from the most ancient classics all the way up to modern fiction or modern business books, recruiting books. I would love nothing more than a month off from my phone just to read and have conversations, then talk about those books and talk to other people and just engaging with people. I'm so heavily technology focused because I'm literally on Teams every day, all day, that at the end of the day, I don't even want to look at my phone. I stick my phone on the table and I go downstairs and I just don't deal with it. And it's some of the nicest time I have, honestly.
I'd like to see people move to using, let's call it long range walkie-talkies.
Yeah.
We had some longer range walkie-talkies for my child when she was younger, and we were trying to make it where she could talk to us if I was on the beach. So I could legitimately leave my phone back at the house. And say, okay, I want to go there and just read a book or just listen to the ocean or just be under an umbrella and just relax and not be on my phone. And unfortunately, it wasn't quite long enough, but now that you say that, I think I might do some research and see if someone's come up with something.
There's some crazy long range ones.
That'll work. So last one is, Name an expensive business mistake that you've either made or observed. And did you learn something from that?
So I've observed this happening in multiple contexts, and it's poor forecasting when you're forecasting your hiring needs. And this is why this is such an important topic for me, because I've seen the downside of what happens in overhiring. I think we saw a real boom of overhiring in 2021 when everybody was just in this mad rush to come out of COVID and hire a bunch of people. They hired people remote. They did this, they did that. Now we see these companies, rather than do layoffs, they're saying, you're remote in Sterling, North Dakota, but by the way, we expect you to move to Bentonville, Arkansas to be part of our corporate office. And just some really shady ways of getting rid of people because they did overhire. And if someone had been conservative in their forecasting, and this happened to a lot of recruiters where in 2021, 2022, especially the biggest offenders were the tech companies, where they hired 1 million recruiters, built out these huge recruitment teams. They thought they were going to be hiring. We hit some snags within the last 1.5 to 2 years. And now we see all of these massive layoffs, all of these TA folks out of work. We see other people out of work because when TA goes, it's because also there's no hiring and a lot of employees are going too. Some of the companies have done it right and they've given long severances and they've made arrangements. They've tried to provide support systems for the people they're laying off that they overhired. But you see a lot of other companies just doing it wrong and saying, we hired you remote, but now we expect you to move, things like that. And I don't like any of that. I think it's very expensive. It's a waste. And really, ultimately, it's a bad candidate experience, right? Because a lot of these companies who have done these layoffs are then going to have to turn around and hire again. But a lot of us, particularly in talent acquisition, are going to look at those companies and go, that's great and all, but what's to keep you from doing this to me again?
Yeah.
Some people will take jobs with them because they have no other options, but the rest of us will be looking to those companies that did right by their employees. And I think at the end of the day, that's just poor forecasting.
When I made the change from analytics into workforce planning and audit, I just see a tremendous opportunity for recruiters to move into those exact functions because they'll have a better understanding of the critical needs that an organization will have probably near term, that they can, let's call it the intake and understanding skills to then increase their forecast ability and say these jobs. I'm not a big fan of, and I've said this more than once on the pod, but I think organizations create positions. They don't create people.
Mm-hmm.
Position itself inherently is probably going to have more than one person in it at some point over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not designed for Andrew. It's not designed for Sarah. It's designed for someone to go into the job and do certain things. And then we figure out, okay, who's got the qualifications to do that work. So I'd like to see more recruiters go into, rather than the supply and demand and this up and down in the forecast, to move into something that's not going to move around, which is more around, say, position management rather than people acquisition. Okay, this is great. You went through the questions. We're going to move into our lightning round. These are the questions that you don't know. And I could ask you any, but they're pretty benign. Sarah, are you ready for the lightning round?
Yes, sir, I am.
Valentine's Day, flowers or chocolate?
Neither. I want to be celebrated on random days for random reasons. My husband gets me flowers for no reason. If I'm getting them on Valentine's Day, it feels like an obligation. Sure, give me a hug and a kiss on Valentine's Day, maybe a cute card. But I want flowers probably about once or twice every couple of months. I want to be celebrated on a Tuesday because it's Tuesday and because you love me.
That was the longest answer I've had thus far around that question. Okay. Museum or aquarium?
Museum.
Chocolate caramels or chocolate pretzels?
Chocolate pretzels.
Black or red licorice?
Black.
By the way, you can say neither. Pool or beach?
Beach.
Hike or bike?
Bike.
Can you go on speaker with your smartphone in public?
No.
Cocktail, wine, sparkling water, or mocktail?
Cocktail.
Okay, we're going to do some word associations. And now we'll close out our lightning round. Disney.
Owl.
Race.
Speed.
Boat.
Sailboat.
Journey.
Jakarta.
Shoes.
Stilettos.
And we're done. That's
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'll put a bumper at the end. So, Sarah, I appreciate you coming in and sharing your experiences, nuances of the work that you do, but also really sharing about you and your persona and some of the things that round you out as a person outside of the professional arena. And I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing, the work that people do in talent acquisition and human resources or on leadership really shape humanity and gives us the opportunity to reciprocate to each other and learn to each other. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Okay. All right, everybody. So thanks so much for joining. We'll see you on the next one. And this will be, make sure you join us for part 2 of Sarah's conversation and check out all sessions that we've had with our speakers and our guests on the pod, which will be found at your favorite podcast platforms. And from Southern New Jersey, this is Andrew signing off. Thanks so much for joining Reciprocity with AG.
Thanks for listening to the Reciprocity with AG podcast. You can enjoy more episodes by favoriting the podcast at leading podcast platforms. On behalf of Andrew Gadomski and all our guests, we enjoyed the time spent with you and ask you to consider reciprocating powerful learnings to and from all you meet.